Story time with Stephanie.
Hi, welcome to the show. I'm Stephanie Storey. This is where I get to talk to other writers about their processes and their passions. I am very excited about my guest today because we actually met up in Maine at a writing class, and this will be our first time to sit down and sort of hash out our own writing processes together. And we have a lot in common to talk about. So she's a novelist and a playwright and a screenwriter, and has her PhD in film. No big deal. She out in our shared land of Hollywood. She has worked with the likes of George Lucas and Aaron Spelling, Disney, and Paramount. Her novels include Find Me in Florence, Breaking Barriers, and Dreams of Discovery. But her newest, just out in August, and it is called 10 Days, a D. Rommel mystery. Welcome to the show, Jule Selbo.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here because there are so many things we have to talk about. We have to talk about writing and Hollywood and Italy. Oh my gosh, you have like as much of an obsession with Italy as I do practically. So this is going to be great.
Yeah, not your art background, but yes, an obsession with it.
But an obsession with the country and the culture and the history and all of those things. So this is going to be great. Okay, but before we get to Italy and the Hollywood, I want to talk about this new book, which I'm going to admit I haven't finished yet. So no spoilers, not only for the audience at home, but for me, because I'm very into it. I don't want you to spoil your own book. So, but before we talk about it, please tell my viewers at home about this fabulous mystery novel. It's really quite, I'm in. So please tell us about it.
10 Days is the story of a young woman who was on the police force in Portland and had a devastating injury where she lost part of her left leg. So she has a below the knee amputation and she's in rehabilitation. So she's gone to work for her godfather, who's a private investigator in town, her father's best friend. Her father's deceased. And she's just the bookkeeper. She's kind of got a big old chip on her shoulder. She's trying to figure out what she wants to do. The police force wants her to come back. She's not quite sure her place. She's not sure about her body. She's not sure about her love life. She's just in a really difficult stage. But she's strong and she's smart. And Gordy has to go down to Florida to take care of something for his brother. Okay, I'm not going to tell you too much, so I'm not spoiling too much. He has commissioned her or told her that she has to start work on this case that's just come into their office. And it's a guy that is an old friend of Gordy's. So she is forced to kind of out of guilt and because Gordy is making her do it, start on this trek to figure out what's going on in this very kind of a high-tech world that she doesn't understand, that she has to figure out and what's going on. Meanwhile, one of her really good friends is attacked by the fabulous looking bad boy in town. And she has to get justice for her friend. So I really worked on this book to really work on the community of Portland. It takes place in Portland, Maine, because I've moved here 3 years ago and I'm just totally in love with it. It's a really strong community. There's very working class and there's very higher social stratas in Portland. And so I wanted to kind of go in and out of both of those communities. So it's Dee trying to figure out what is going on in these mysteries, but also what's going on for herself.
That's part of what is so compelling to me about it, is that it isn't just sort of a straight up, I mean, it is. It's got all the features of a mystery. Like, you're like, what's going to happen? Who's this person? Who can I trust? Who can't I? You're like freaked out about all that stuff. But at the same time, I'm very invested in her journey, particularly with just her own body and trying to figure all of that out. What made you, before I ask about some of like getting into mystery, and then I definitely want to ask about Portland, what made you want to write about an amputee?
I don't think I actually thought about it too much. I knew that I had put off trying to write a crime mystery for a long time. I guess a very long time, because I just thought, oh, it's my favorite genre to read. And I knew how hard it was. in Hollywood, I'd written some mysteries and stuff like that, and plotting them and working them out. And I just realized the outline and the time it took. So when I decided to move to Portland and become a novelist or focus on writing novels, I did 3 other ones before this, just to kind of see, okay, can I actually get through a book? Can I start it, get to the middle, figure it out and finish it? And I thought, okay, it's time to, really challenge myself. So I started writing this woman, and I don't know why I did it. I started writing it, and all of a sudden there it was. And it's so interesting because, when you are creating characters, you try to think about their flaws and their emotional flaws. And I thought, well, what if she has a real physical flaw that that is contributing to her emotional and psychological flaws? Because writing about perfect people, as you know, with all your books and all your experience, it's not very exciting to write, and it's not very exciting for the reader or the audience to watch. So it just kind of happened. And once I wrote it, I thought, oh my God, here I go. And then I had to dive into all that research, which was fascinating for me.
How did the research into that change you?
I started noticing a lot more around me, and just how, not so much that it's common, but it's very commonplace to see someone with a amputated leg, both legs, one leg below the knee, above the knee. And when I moved to Portland, there's a coffee shop. I love to write in coffee shops. There's a coffee shop that is only a few blocks from me, and I'd go there every morning because it opened at 5 o'clock in the morning. And there was a gentleman there, and I'd been working on the book I was about halfway through, and he started coming in and meeting his best buddy, and he's like, I don't know, 50s or something. And I noticed that he had a below the knee amputation. And as what happens in coffee shops, if you go there every day, you start talking to people, it becomes this kind of your surrogate family. And I said, I would love, he actually told me, he came up to me and he said, I heard you're a writer. The buzz around the coffee shop is that you're a writer. And I've written a memoir about myself losing my leg, and I would love to get your feedback on it. And I said, oh, I would love to. So we just became really good friends. And so I kind of went in through his name is John Lemieux, John's journey. He lost his leg through cancer, but all the stuff that he's gone through and all his rehabilitation. And then there's a couple of offices, prosthetic offices around town that I would go in and I would talk. And so basically I was just more aware.
And I love it that this was your favorite genre, and then you put off writing it, because I always think that don't do that. Just write your favorite genre. Even if you fail at it, even if you're terrible at it, just write what you love to read. But what was the hardest part for you? Like when you, not the fear of getting into it, when you actually got into like doing the mystery and getting down to all of that plot from like a craft perspective, what was the part that you were like, oh my gosh, I can't do this?
Well, there were times where I just went, this is crazy, because you do get to a point where you're working so hard to make it difficult and to avoid the main character getting the answers that she needs to make the big light go on, that sometimes you can kind of get lost in making that happen. And I just remember working in Hollywood that over the years, I found that you don't hold back secrets. The more that you tell the audience as much as you can makes the writer dig down deeper into the character. So what's interesting, because now I'm working on 9 Days, which is the next book in this series, I actually had to go back and rework the first half in the last week because I had gotten too far into keeping her away from any answers that were going to propel her in a different direction. And I was just stalling. It was just like I was tap dancing, kind of going, okay, you're not moving forward, you're just complicating. So I had to like strip some of that stuff away so that I could give her some answers, or she could find some answers. And then that made her go deeper into the reasons that they were happening.
And as a writer, it pushes you to get more complicated and pushes you to go, well, I guess that obstacle wasn't so difficult if I can just give her the answer and the obstacle's over. I mean, you know, like that does give you a different level of challenge as a writer, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And also, you know, you think when you start it, you think, okay, I know what's going to happen. I know who the bad guy's going to be. And then as you're writing it, you go, oh, wait a minute. Maybe this character isn't supposed to be doing what I thought she was supposed to be doing. Maybe this is the bad, you know, so it's like you take the journey of the mystery, because as you write it, options open up and you think, well, maybe the first way that I thought I was going to write it isn't the way that I want it to go.
You talked about Portland a lot. So you moved to Portland, Maine, which is up in the middle of like nowhere. I mean, it's great. I loved it when I visited, and my husband and I always joke that if something ever happens to him, I'm just going to end up in some tiny town in Maine and just tuck myself away and never leave.
Yeah.
So one, how did you get to Maine? And two, what you brushed a little bit of why bringing the Portland community in was so important, but why did it become such an important thing for you to explore when you've been there a relatively brief period of time?
Yeah, you know, the book that I wrote about Florence here, it was funny. That was when I was teaching in Florence, Italy, for my university, and I said, okay, I'm out of California. I'm here for 4 months. And by that time, I knew I wanted to make the transition to novels, but I said, okay, you're gonna write your novel. So I got up in Florence. I walked to my favorite 6 a.m. coffee shop, you know, right by the Uffizi. And I thought I was going to translate a Western movie that I'd written that Tom Cruise's company had for a long time, and they never made it. So it reverted back to me. And I thought, this is such a great story, and I'll just make this into a novel. And I sat down to write, and I was so bored. I was like, oh God, because there wasn't that discovery, because I already knew the story. I knew how it was going to lay out. And I said, you know what I always tell my students is write where you are at this minute, who you are. It didn't even matter geographically, but write who you are right then. And I just had a little argument tiff with my husband. And, and so I sat down and I thought, okay, I'm just going to start writing and see what happens. And my first line was, when did I know I married the wrong man? And so I was thinking, what if this woman has come to Florence and she now realizes she's married the wrong man? And so then I said, oh my God, I've said it in Florence and I'm new to Florence. So the learning about Florence and trekking around Florence was just part, and for the book, and also for my, you know, enjoyment, was just enriched my experience there. So back to Portland. So I got to Portland, and I just fell in love with it. We came here because my husband's a sailor, and he had come out to California because of my work and stuff. And it was finally time where I said, well, let's go where you want to be. And he said, I just got to go back to the East Coast to be able to sail around islands and the bays and up the coast. And so we checked it out a couple of times, and it's got theater, it's got, you know, fine arts, some of the most extraordinary novelists live here. And it's such a welcoming community that, I don't know. And it's just, like I said before, there's a wide variety of people who live here.
Okay. So you've talked about Florence, and you know, that's like my heart lives over there in Florence. So when you first get over there and you're going to a coffee shop by the Uffizi, I can already picture it. It's
I
great.
know, it's crazy.
And you end up sitting down, you end up writing a novel set in Italy. And then some of your historical fiction ends up revolving around Italy. What was it about the culture or the city or the history that captured your imagination so much that you end up writing multiple books about it?
Well, well, as you know, I mean, you turn a corner and there's a statue right in front of you that should be in a museum is just right there, and you can experience this history and art, and you know, there's concerts by the Arno River, and it's so rich that you know, during the pandemic, I think I dreamt about Florence more than I dreamt about anything, not being able to go there. Because it's a small town, especially the old part of it. You can walk it and walk it and walk it, always seeing something new, but it feels small. And the people are fantastic. So I became very, very involved in its history. And the other two books I wrote, those were written on assignment. I was hired to write those.
Really?
Yeah, the Laura Bassey book and the Giovanni Cabato book, the John Cabot book.
Oh.
And so I had a person that I knew who was working for this company, and he called me up and he said, "Hey, I heard you're into writing novels now." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "And I hear you're kind of living in Italy part of the time." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Hey, would you like to do this?" And I was like, "Okay, yeah." So they were fantastic to explore and to research. You know, because of our experiences in Hollywood, you in a film, you usually take, okay, what's the most dramatic part of this person's life? And that's where I'll focus the story. And he went, no, 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 no. Birth to death. And I was like, okay. And so Giovanni Cabato, who actually grew up in Genoa, same as Columbus, they were pretty close in age. Who knows if they actually met each other, but in my book, they did as kids. And then Giovanni had to move with his family for various reasons to different parts of Italy. And then it took him to different places. But it was just fascinating to, then, take the train up to Genoa, walk those streets that looked the same as they did when Cabato was there. And Laura Bassey was even more difficult because she was in the 17th, she was born in 1711, I think. And, women weren't given the opportunity for an education, but she was I think she was probably a genius, who knows, but her father was very supportive. And she ended up being the head of the physics department, experimental physics department at University of Bologna, which was the top university in the world at that point. And her journey and all the people and the popes. I mean, when I was reading Raphael and you have these popes, I was like going, oh, these popes, they were just causing so much trouble.
You were talking about earlier the amount of planning that goes into and the amount of freedom you have to give yourself when you're writing mystery, but the amount of planning that has to go in to make all the pieces work out, to make it all come together, and that was daunting to you. But that's the same problem in historical fiction. I mean, you're having to take all these huge puzzle pieces and work them together. So which one was more challenging on that front? Or were they just two completely different and they're impossible to compare?
Well, historical fiction, I knew I would eventually finish because I knew there were historical facts that will take me to this person's death. And it was just a matter of getting them in and making them dramatic and making people care about the characters. And so there was something calming about it, even as my notebooks of research grew and grew and grew and grew. And I thought, I might finish this, but it might be 10 years of my life, because what am I going to take? What is going to actually make this story work in a context where reader can understand the person and get a sense of everything, but I can't put in every single detail. And so that was a little bit calmer feeling than the mystery where, you know, I could close it up tomorrow and go, I don't know, who knows? But I went to a great conference last week on Zoom, Murder and Mayhem. That's out of Chicago. And they did it Zoom this year. And everybody, I mean, my list of books to read just got so long. Louise Penny was there. All these amazing people, but they had a couple of true crime panels, and really like some of the top true crime novelists. And I was thinking, oh, maybe that's a combination that, you know, would be have a little bit more structure and guideposts, but I have no idea. Because in 10 days, I want to get down to 1 day. So I have the next 5 years, 6 years of my life planned out.
So you're going to do, I started to say, so I know that this is the beginning of a series. Like you have this planned already. You have Dee as the central character who we were talking about earlier, planned as a series, but it is a 9-10 book series. 10 days, 9 days, 8 days, 7 days, 6 days, 5 days, 4 days, 3 days, 1. What gave you well, first of all, it's brilliant. I love it. But what gave you that idea to do that before? Did you have that before you even started writing the first one?
No.
Okay.
No, the original title of 10 Days was 10 Days to a Wedding. And everyone thought that sounded too much like a romance. And so I just said, well, let's call it 10 days. And then then someone goes, it was probably my husband. He goes, well, then the next one has to be 9 days. And I was like, oh my God, here I go. So.
That's sort of, is that exciting or is that daunting to have given yourself, or is it both? To have given yourself this sort of long-term series project? Are you in love enough with Dee to do it? What's your feeling about it? Let's find out now. And then let me ask you when we're closer down to the shorter number of days, we'll revisit the question. Yeah. So tell me now how you're feeling about it.
It does give a nice structure to it. And as far as living with Dee for the next 5 years or more, who knows? I think that there's enough there and enough things that I can explore with her. And, you know, one of the TV shows that I worked on was Melrose Place. And it, you know, making those stories stretch and stretch and stretch. And I was thinking about it actually that, you know, in a murder mystery novel, usually, not always, but usually there's a crime mystery that beginning, middle, and end. And then the relationship arc doesn't have to end at the end. And you've got people like Bosch and Sue Grafton and all those people where that relationship or the character arc doesn't end. Part of the reason you pick up the next book is you want to go, oh, well, what's going to happen with that person or something like that. So that's the fun part, if I can keep it moving.
Craft-wise, like writing-wise, like process-wise, what made you want to leave behind the Hollywood and go into, because noveling's a different form, you know, and in Hollywood, you're pretty much like, I always think of it as you're like an architect. You're putting the architecture down of the story. And there's so many other people. There are the actors who fill it and the directors and the set designers and the costumers. There are all these other people who fill in a lot of the gaps. And the novelist, it's all you for better or for worse. Like there's nothing else. But so was it that, or was it just being able to get into somebody's head? In Hollywood, you only have the screen. You pretty much have the dialogue and the visuals. There's no, I mean, unless you're using a VO, there's no getting into somebody's head. What was it like craft storytelling wise that made you say, I am ready at this point in my life to tackle novels as opposed to TV and film?
Well, it kind of was my dream as a little kid. I used to go into my closet and write little books, and my father was an attorney, And way back then, I don't even know what it was, but he would come home with these film cans that were about this big that they would take during depositions. And he knew I loved these little film cans. So I would write these books, and then I would write them on little circles and put the book inside the film can and tie it up and give them away for presents. And so I guess maybe that was like, I just realizing now there's film and there's story right there, even though it was kind of like not a film. But I started in high school writing plays and acting in plays, but mostly writing. And the collaboration was so much fun. And then you go to Hollywood and it's so much fun. It's a lot of heartache, a lot of, oh my God, I can't believe I got that stupid note, kind of feeling. But most of the time the notes would make it better. Sometimes they just made it different, but you had to take the note because you were taking their paycheck. And then after a while, I did it for over 20 years. After a while, I was like, I've lost myself, because I was writing on, I was writing mostly on assignment, which I was very grateful for. So I always had executives. I always had a director. I always had, whoever giving me notes, and I'd make rewrites and I'd do this. And sometimes things would get made, which was great. And sometimes my favorite projects would be sitting on a shelf. And so it wasn't so much that I got tired of, I wanted just to hear my own voice. I wanted to just go, this is me, and nobody please tell me what to do.
Jule, this was a lovely conversation. Now I can't wait for 9 days so we can revisit it, and we can do it again, and then 8 days, and then 7 days, and then all kinds of days. And then one day you'll be writing historical fiction again, or maybe you'll be writing true crime fiction. That'll be very exciting. Yeah. Thank you very much. This is everybody at home. I'm in the middle of it. It's really good. So I hope this does spectacularly well, and you get to go out and make many, many more of them. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Stephanie.
And everybody else, I will see you next time.
Bye. With Stephanie.
Bye.
Story time virtually. We've got time and plenty of stories, talking stories in a novel way. Story time with Stephanie.